You know that moment when someone tells you something incredible happened to them, and while everyone else immediately seems excited, your mind quietly starts looking for the missing pieces. Maybe a friend tells you they found the perfect relationship. Maybe a coworker shares exciting news about a new opportunity. Maybe someone describes a situation that sounds almost too good to be true. And before you even realize you're doing it, a small part of your brain begins asking questions. Is there more to the story? What aren't they telling me? How long will this actually last? Most people assume this means you're naturally pessimistic or distrustful, but psychologists have been studying this pattern for years, and what they've discovered is far more interesting. The truth is that skepticism isn't always about doubting other people. In many cases, it's about the way your mind has learned to deal with uncertainty. Many skeptical people quietly assume there's something wrong with them because they don't experience the same effortless optimism that seems to come naturally to others. They wonder why they can't simply accept things at face value, why they always feel the need to analyze, question, or look a little deeper. But psychology suggests this tendency often has less to do with negativity and more to do with experience. Because nobody is born skeptical. Those habits usually develop slowly, shaped by experiences that teach the brain a simple lesson. Things are not always what they seem. Here's what makes this fascinating. Your brain is constantly creating shortcuts to help you navigate life. Every experience teaches it something. If you touch a hot stove, your brain remembers. If you nearly trip down a staircase, your brain remembers. Emotional experiences work in a surprisingly similar way. When trust leads to disappointment, your brain remembers. When confidence leads to embarrassment, your brain remembers that too. Over time, these experiences begin forming patterns. Eventually, your mind starts operating with a new rule. Look twice before believing something. Search for details others might miss. Treat certainty with caution. At first, this can actually be useful. Skeptical people often notice things others overlook. They ask questions that prevent mistakes. They're less likely to be fooled by unrealistic promises. In many situations, skepticism acts like a psychological security system, quietly scanning the environment for potential problems. The challenge is that once this habit becomes deeply ingrained, it doesn't always switch off when danger isn't present. The same mindset that protects you from deception can make it difficult to fully trust positive experiences. A compliment arrives, and instead of accepting it, you wonder what motivated it. A new opportunity appears, and instead of feeling excited, your mind starts calculating every possible downside. Something good happens, and part of you instinctively prepares for the possibility that it won't last. Now here's where things become psychologically interesting. Most skeptical people assume skepticism is about being wrong, but often that's not what researchers observe. Many skeptical people aren't trying to avoid being wrong at all. What they're trying to avoid is being blindsided. There's a difference. Being wrong is uncomfortable. Being caught completely off guard feels worse. It creates that painful feeling of realizing there was something important you didn't see coming. For some people, that experience leaves a lasting impression. The brain begins treating uncertainty itself as something that needs to be monitored, not because danger is everywhere, but because the possibility of surprise becomes something it wants to avoid. As a result, many skeptical people live with a kind of quiet mental vigilance. Not anxiety necessarily, not fear, just observation. They're paying attention to details, they're noticing inconsistencies, they're comparing what people say with what people do, they're evaluating situations from multiple angles before reaching a conclusion. And because this process feels logical and responsible, they rarely notice how much mental energy it consumes. It's like having dozens of browser tabs open in your mind at the same time. Each one seems manageable on its own, but together they require a surprising amount of attention. Here's the part many people never realize. Skepticism doesn't always focus on the outside world. Eventually, it can begin turning inward. Some of the most skeptical people aren't suspicious of others nearly as much as they're suspicious of themselves. They question their own decisions. They second-guess their own instincts. They doubt their own successes. They receive praise and wonder whether it's deserved. They achieve something meaningful and quietly attribute it to luck. Their minds become so accustomed to looking for flaws and alternative explanations that certainty becomes difficult to hold on to even when the evidence is right in front of them. If these ideas resonate with you, you might enjoy exploring more psychology like this. Subscribing helps this channel reach people who may need to hear it. What makes this even more fascinating is that beneath skepticism often lies something surprisingly human. Most skeptical people aren't driven by cynicism. They're driven by a desire to understand. They want clarity. They want accuracy. They want to avoid unnecessary pain and disappointment. Their minds are trying to make sense of a world that often feels unpredictable. The problem is that life rarely offers complete certainty. There will always be unanswered questions. There will always be unknown variables. And for a mind that has learned to rely on skepticism for safety, that reality can feel deeply uncomfortable. One of the most validating discoveries in psychology is that skepticism and distrust are not the same thing. People often confuse them because they look similar from the outside. But distrust says, "I already know this isn't true." Skepticism says, "I need more information before I decide." That's an important distinction. In fact, many highly skeptical people are actually quite open-minded. They're not committed to disbelief, they're committed to investigation. They simply feel more comfortable reaching conclusions after examining the evidence carefully. The challenge is that this approach can sometimes make life feel more complicated than it needs to be. And this brings us to something researchers find particularly interesting. Many skeptical people develop an identity around being the person who sees what others miss. They become the observer, the analyst, the careful thinker, and there is real value in those qualities. The world needs people who ask difficult questions and challenge assumptions. But sometimes this identity creates an unexpected trap, because once skepticism becomes part of how you see yourself, trust can start feeling uncomfortable. Confidence can feel risky. Accepting things without extensive analysis can feel irresponsible. Doubt becomes familiar, and familiarity often feels safer than certainty. The irony is that many skeptical people spend years believing their skepticism is helping them eliminate uncertainty, when in reality it may simply be helping them manage it. No amount of analysis can guarantee perfect outcomes. No amount of questioning can completely remove risk from life. Eventually, everyone encounters situations where trust becomes necessary. Everyone reaches moments where they must move forward without complete certainty. And sometimes the most important psychological shift isn't learning how to question more effectively. It's learning to recognize when the questioning itself has become automatic. So if you've always considered yourself a skeptical person, it may not mean you're negative. It may not mean you're cynical. And it certainly doesn't mean there's something wrong with the way your mind works. It may simply mean you've spent years developing a mental strategy designed to protect you from disappointment, confusion, and surprise. A strategy that became so familiar you stopped noticing it. And once you begin recognizing that pattern, something interesting happens. You stop seeing skepticism as a personality flaw. Instead, you begin seeing it for what it often is: a habit of attention, a way of processing uncertainty, a lens through which you've learned to view the world. And sometimes understanding the reason behind a pattern changes your relationship with it. Not overnight, not instantly, but gradually. Because once you understand why your mind questions so much, you no longer have to question yourself quite as much. If this perspective resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might relate. And if you've noticed this tendency in your own life, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the most revealing discoveries aren't about why you doubt the world around you. They're about understanding why your mind learned to look for certainty in the first place.